Oh hi, my name is Kyle Marshall, and here we read the book, watch the movie, and then have a discussion about it. Today we're going to discuss the latest Robin Hood movie starring Taron Egerton. Last week we talked about the history of Robin Hood from folktale hero to modern day vigilante. I won't go over the book again in minute detail, but definitely go and watch that video to get a fuller understanding of the history of Robin Hood. Here is what I will say, and it's a reiteration of something that I mentioned in the previous video, but there is no definitive version of Robin Hood. He was celebrated as a champion of the common folk for sure, but he and his merry band of gentlemen have been altered and changed depending on the culture. We understand the essence of the character without the authors doing too much work. There are similarities between the original tales and many of the film adaptations, such as the importance in meeting Little John, the Sheriff of Nottingham being a central antagonist, and the redistribution of money that Robin stole from the greedy rich. The latest to try and adapt these tales is once again called Robin Hood. It stars Taron Egerton, Jamie Foxx, Ben Mendelsohn, and Eve Hewson. It's directed by Otto Bathurst, who is primarily known for directing episodes of television such as Peaky Blinders and Black Mirror. In all the marketing for this film, you know that this is made to be a revisionist take on the Robin Hood tales. It's amping up the action sequences and using a more rock and roll attitude. There is no attempt to make this a real depiction of England or the class divides of the time. And I want to be clear that nothing of what I just said makes it automatically bad. What makes this a bad movie is all in the execution, which is disappointing because there are ideas and subversions that this film has which could have been compiled into a very satisfying whole. Here's a brief rundown. Robin of Locksley is part of the nobility. He falls in love with Marian after she tries to steal his horse, and then he is drafted into the English army to be part of the Crusades. The Crusades are filmed like a gritty modern war film. It's hard to miss the very obvious metaphor of war in the Middle East. And to be fair, I think this is the coolest part of the movie. Everyone uses bows and arrows for both long range and short range attacks. The sound effects for the arrows sound and feel like gunshots. There's a sniper that they encounter who is firing arrows as if from a machine gun. Robin's heart is just so pure, so that when he sees the Guy of Gisborne killing unarmed enemies, he cannot stand by with saying nothing. When one of the captors pleads to sacrifice himself to save his son, Gisborne kills the son anyway, and Robin stages a revolt. That man, who lost his son, is Little John, played by Jamie Foxx. Robin, because he's a lord, is sent back to England to find a depressed town oppressed by taxes and a government and church who are more concerned with riches than with their humanity. While the movie is competently shot, the action scenes are serviceable, and all the actors do a great job with what they're given, everything is bogged down with a script that is so on the nose that it becomes preachy. I already mentioned the obvious metaphor of the war in Afghanistan. Well, there are also allusions to recent American protests and politics. Except instead of being a thematic thread to hang the story on, they all feel ham-fisted into a script that really wants you to appreciate how woke it is. And I say this as a pretty left-leaning person. It's not that I disagree with the sentiment, but I think we've all been around somebody who is trying desperately to appear that they don't care about how awesome they are, but they really want to let you know how awesome they are. That's this movie. I also think it just isn't fun. I know there are many haters out there, but what I appreciate about many of the Marvel films is that they can be dramatic while never losing their sense of joy. Even with how depressing Infinity War ended up, there was still time for hijinks, jokes, and playfulness. There is an attempt at humor in this movie, but most of it falls completely flat. In my theater, I think there was a grand total of twice that somebody let out a laugh. Otherwise, it was gritted teeth silence. It's borrowing from many modern films, such as the recent James Bond series, along with the Mission Impossible movies, the Marvel Universe, and the clearest analogy, the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes films, but it always feels like a pale imitation. In the original Robin Hood stories, Robin is a good-natured man who likes playing pranks. After becoming an outlaw, he takes from the rich only to give back to the poorest of people, the people who could use a leg up. This film's outlook seems to be more anarchy-based. He takes money for sure, but needs to be pushed into giving it to others besides his love, Marian. When he does give it away, it's by literally throwing it into the streets to have people fight over a few pieces of gold. Characters keep saying how much Robin is a man of the people, a leader for the voiceless, and a fighter for good. But I don't ever see it. It's just characters saying that's what he is, even though his actions tell a far different story. And yet the movie seems to believe that these words are being spoken earnestly. The worst is the utter disregard to trying to create a villain that isn't a caricature. I love Ben Mendelsohn. He tries his hardest with the Sheriff of Nottingham and convincingly pulls off Angry Tyrant, but his motive is that as a young kid he was beaten by the clergy and nobility, so he decided to grow up and punish the poor? That doesn't track with me. Or at the very least, I need more information, because in better hands, you could have made me sympathize with the villain while simultaneously wanting him to be vanquished. The church of this movie is essentially a mustache-twirling evil incarnate. They knowingly speak about how they are the true power down on Earth and that they don't care about the regular folk. Which, to be honest, maybe is more realistic than I think it is, but having been around people who are deluded with power, it's usually much more subtle than that. And today's modern audiences deserve something that is better thought out than, hey, religion is bad, and therefore people who practice religion are also bad. This is The Travesty, a film that dealt with a nobleman sent off to war and coming back with some kind of emotional and possibly even real scars, and noticing that the country he left has changed into a dictatorship ruled by an elite and a religion that had lost their way, is an interesting story. Mix in rallying a bunch of people together and some action sequences involving heists with just a sprinkling of self-aware humor would be something that I believe audiences would enjoy. What we're left with is a pretty lifeless film that has occasional spots of intrigue or inventiveness. Ultimately, this will be forgotten pretty quickly if it hasn't been already. So what are the similarities between this film and the Howard Pyle book? There are a few, but the basics are still there. Robin meets Little John first. He has fallen in love with Marian. When he returns home, his greatest foe is the Sheriff of Nottingham. He steals money from the rich to redistribute it amongst the poor. The biggest differences in this version is that they've made Little John a black man who was fighting on the opposite side during the Crusades, but decides to follow Robin after Robin tries to save Little John's son. Will Scarlet, instead of being a relative to Robin, is now married to Marian when he returns home. And while the Sheriff of Nottingham is absolutely the main antagonist, it's much more the church that is the big bad of the story. What I discovered through all of this is that I'm not a fan of most of the Robin Hood tales. The book was a bit of a drag to get through. Most adaptations aren't that good. This is definitely the worst I've seen, but to be honest, I'd still rather watch this again than read the novel. The lesson is not that you shouldn't stray from the source material, I actually think you should, but you need to make these characters believable in order for your themes to carry resonance. The next time that it's adapted, my hope is that it adapts the death of Robin Hood, because that has the potential of truly being a bold way to tell the story. So that's what I thought. Did anyone else go and watch Robin Hood? Looking at the box office, not many people did, but what did you think? Let me know down in the comments below. I've left some links to check out some of the other adaptations, but the next time you see me, we'll be discussing Boy Erased. Be prepared for a pretty depressing conversation. Have a great day.